What's up, man?
Not too much. In the park, going for a walk. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, man. I'm doing fine. It's a gorgeous day.
It is really nice out here. How's the weather out with you?
Pretty much the same, man. Nashville's pretty chill right now.
Well, going to see some country music over the weekend. I don't know. I don't know anything about Nashville. I drove through it. That's it.
Oh yeah, I no, it's a city. And I stay away from the country bars because they're all downtown, which is bachelorette party central.
No, that makes sense. So, what do you want to talk about regarding our shit show of a democracy today?
The shit show of democracy. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned because Trump pulled her out of office, and I'm like so mixed about it.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, yes, resign, and on the other, I don't think we should give him that much power.
Well, I don't know how you like. Well, I mean, she was standing up to him, and not. This is not the first time that Republicans have stood up to him by resigning. Like, okay, well, if you really want to do it, maybe stay in power and do something. I mean, like
I
people who,
look. I mean, the death threats, the deep fake porn, all of that. She's getting hit with a fire hose. Like at a certain point, you kind of have to be like, I'm thinking about my family's safety. So I do understand that, but on the other hand, she's kind of a bitch, and I'm really glad she's resigning.
I mean, well, I just want to clarify my thoughts. Like, I think if you're a general and you want to protest by resigning, that's fantastic. I think the idea that you do more help than harm by staying in, that's a fallacy. But she's elected. She has an independent base of power, and she certainly knows how to, wield the base and cause death threats herself. So she knows how to play the game. If she's resigning, this is strategic or just cowardice or whatever, some way that benefits her most. This has nothing to do with principle.
Um, you know what? I'm gonna go with cowardice.
Yeah,
But
like, oh,
I don't think it's a principled stand. I don't think she's capable of a principled stand. Um, she's one of the most um opportunistic creatures that we've seen in Congress in quite some time, which is saying something given that we started with the Tea Party back in 2012 and it's kind of gone slowly downhill since Newt Gingrich ever discovered C-SPAN. But the thing is that it's not principled, and that's fine. It is cowardice because I think that what happened is she finally saw the consequences of her own actions, and like we are only about a month and a half away from Charlie Kirk. So that's still riding high in Republican circles, and everybody's kind of thinking about like how absolutely, you know, safety is a thing, but they also can't say much about guns. So resignation is kind of, it makes sense from a personal safety perspective.
well, switching topics because I don't know how far I want to go down that road. I'm not sure I agree, but um,
I'm
is
not
that
sure I agree either, but I will tell you that being a woman in public life is a hell of a lot different than being a guy in public life. And so the metrics are slightly different.
sure, but Jeff Flake resigned. I mean, until MTG resigned, it was almost all men who would say, you know, I think Trump might not be awesome. I'm resigning. Like that
Oh
would
yeah,
be their
well,
take.
no, men taking principled stupid stands is not a new thing in history.
But it wasn't principled. It was not, I'm going to do everything I can to oppose him. I'm going to support my Democrats. It would be some tepid remark that was halfway critical with no action to follow except I'm resigning. And I mean, yeah, but leaving that aside, because that's been talked about
Well, the
before. But
influence that's principled is the thing, though. Is if you read conservative literature, if you're steeped in conservative thought, then you understand that they think of that as leadership and not cowardice. So I think like you're not wrong to call it that, but I think that they think that they're taking a principled stand.
I don't think they do. I mean, and that's just
Oh,
like, but you can
bullshit, I
find,
think.
you can find like, oh, I'm trying to think of something, but you just choose your literature. I mean, like, by Buddhist literature, doing nothing and sitting under a tree and giving away all your possessions is a principled stand, but it doesn't change the world around you, it doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, well,
I'm
I
just
mean, I
using
don't
Buddhism. I'm just saying
think
you could pick a literature you want. You could pick a literature, that there's enough
yeah, no,
philosophies
I
out
don't
there.
disagree. It's just that that happens to be the literature that they were all, working from. So, in any case, what else?
Well, I just sort of I do agree that the complete abandonment of immorality from Republican politics is contemporaneous with Newt Gingrich's entry into politics. But do you think he caused it? So I
No, no, no,
mean,
no. I think it's a chicken egg sort of situation where if Newt Gingrich had never discovered that C-SPAN would air all of his stuff, and then there wasn't CNN and Fox News, and so the rise of 24-hour cable news meant that those C-SPAN clips, which are publicly available and not they don't cost anything. So that made sense from a media perspective. And then, the politicians and the media start feeding on each other. And then we have particularly partisan media, which happened more and more. And, the bifurcation of media sourcing and, the lack of a single common nightly news anchor. You had three channels and you could, go with Brokaw or Cronkite or whatever, but everybody was working from the same basic news information feed, and now they're not. So I don't think that Newt Gingrich caused any of that, because I don't think he had the power to do anything like that. But I do think he was the first of the really truly opportunistic Congress people in the new media environment.
like you think if it wasn't Newt, it would have been someone else. Because I mean, I think there's an argument that he did cause it. No, no, sorry, I'm not trying to talk out both sides of my mouth. I don't want to think that our world today is the result of Newt Gingrich. I don't want to give him that kind of power. But I know that people have said that he's the first one who brought a true like evangelical ruthlessness to Congress, where any weapon was fair to use and principles be damned.
No, I don't think that's true. I mean, we saw that, going back to the 60s and 70s. Like, it's certainly not new. What was new was the media environment, was the fact that, Rush Limbaugh was really popular and had millions of listeners, that, there was 24-hour news all of a sudden, that the internet was invented and became publicly available. So all of those things came together, and Newt happened to be the guy that happened to be, you know, right there and saw the opportunity and did it. So, like, did he cause it? Sure, but only in the way that any snowflake is responsible for an avalanche.
Well, that was a really thorough and erudite answer. I appreciate it.
It's
I feel
literally
like
my
I've
job,
learned
dude.
something. I feel like I've learned something, and that's not every day for me. Um, you know, well, obviously, I think Fox News was people are like, you know, uh, if this had been Nixon, this would have brought down his thing. I'm like, well, the reason Fox News existed to make sure Nixon would never have been impeached again. Like, Fox News was created to solve the problem of Nixon's impeachment.
I think that's giving Murdoch way too much credit. Fox News was created because Rupert Murdoch wanted to, like, one up the media moguls back in Britain and also prove something to the Aussies. And he couldn't break into the American market in the way that he had on Fleet Street, because tabloids were just a whole different thing. So he had the Post and all that. But then, he saw an opportunity to make a hell of a lot of money, and he got Roger Ailes involved. And Roger Ailes is the guy that wanted, to make sure that conservatives had cover and all of that. But again, Ailes is an opportunist, or was. And
Well, I mean,
so,
yeah, Els was shopping the idea around, and Rupert Murdoch gave him the platform. But there was a while where they talked about that those guys were equals. Like they would, when they met, they would have to meet on like a neutral floor because neither would come to the other's office. So I mean, I
yeah,
don't think
well,
Roger
they were
Ailes
both
is.
gigantic pricks. So,
Yeah, but there was a. I mean, like Fox News is as much a creation of Roger Ailes, if not more so, than Rupert Murdoch. And Roger
oh,
Ailes definitely
sure.
created.
That's what I mean to say is I think, it doesn't happen without Murdoch, but Murdoch was purely opportunistic, whereas Ailes was politically opportunistic.
He was a man with a dream,
Yeah, it
the
was just
worst
a
dream in the world,
evil
but a man
job.
with a dream, a man with a vision.
If you build it.
He was true. If you build it, they in fact will come in droves. Oh, well, that's just anyway. That's history. Anything else new and exciting in your life or in the news?
Well, so the thing that's been freaking me out lately is that China stopped buying soy. So if you think about that and the fact that like that wiped out a good portion of the crops for this year because they were our largest or our largest importer of soy, and they kind of just went with South American. They didn't, cancel anything, but as a result of the tariffs and generally, Donald Trump, writ large, they decided not to trade in America, which means that a whole lot of farmers lost this year's crops. And then also the fallow cycle for soy means that next year a whole bunch of farmers aren't going to be able to put in as much as they had planned on. So that changes like the way that we're buying or the way that they need to buy seed for next year, which is again something that is being screwed up by the tariffs. So I'm not entirely certain what's going to happen to the food supply next year, and that's kind of freaking me out a little.
Yeah, that is the idea that we can't afford anything and everything is more expensive, and this is just the tip of the economic iceberg that we are plowing towards, like the Titanic,
Yeah,
is
it's not
pretty
even the
terrifying.
economics of it. It's just the way that farming works. So it's not a question of the pricing of the food supply. It's a question of whether there's the capacity to maintain farmers through a shutdown and the farm bill not being passed, and all of these things that are going on. And then on top of that, you just are like, anyway, so 45% of the export market for one of our staple crops is gone. Have fun with that.
Right, but I mean that's not even an immediate problem. That's a problem like maybe months or years down the road. Like the collapse of farming, I mean, compared to the fact that we're already in huge trouble economically because of the fact that things were expensive and inflation before, and we've had 9 months of that's doubled or tripled, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah. It's exponential inflation is not a great thing.
No, and not when the when the proposed solution is in fact the problem. Well, Anyway, speaking of, did you see that they're like not releasing the job numbers or the other economic numbers, and they're just shredding everything?
Yeah, so that's great. I'm a huge fan of that. But no, they can't afford to release the jobs numbers because the trouble that they're going to run into is they haven't been counting because Doge, kind of killed all of those grants and all of those programs where the counting would even be done. And then the websites, of course, have all been kind of messed with. So the trouble that they're going to run into is they don't have jobs numbers to release, really.
Yeah. Oh, the Venn diagram of incompetence and corruption is always fascinating in this administration.
Yeah, I didn't know that you could circle harder, but apparently they found a way to like make a sphere out of Venn.
I mean, I really don't know. Like any given problem, like is it 90% incompetence, 10% corruption, 50-50, 90-10, or is it just both 100% one circle?
I think it's basically 100% both because, again, any decision that's made in government isn't made by one person. And you need all of those factors to be in play for anything to get done right now. So it's got to be a little bit of everything.
I would say it used to not be by one person, but as of about 9 months ago, I'm pretty sure it is.
What, Stephen Miller?
Well, yes, but only because he is the Trump whisperer, or is able to tell people that Trump agreed to this, and Trump doesn't contradict them. Like, it's a lot like a prophet, or like Paul saying, "Jesus told me," you know. After he died, he showed up to me in a dream. No, no, you can't see it. It was a dream, but I saw him and he told me. Same thing. You just say Trump agreed, and if he doesn't
Yeah,
contradict
but
you,
I mean, sure, but like that still requires X number of people to follow through on any order that's given. It requires speechwriters to write the executive orders. It requires Trump to sign it. It requires a whole bunch of sign-offs by a whole bunch of people in the administration because they're all jockeying for power because they're all morons.
yeah, but there's things that they all agree on, like authoritarianism,
Oh, sure, but
discrimination,
then is that
misogyny.
incompetence or is that, opportunism or is it whatever? Like, I don't think it really, because you're gonna get like a little bit of everything from the fact that there are so many different people touching it. So like, where does one end and the other begin? I don't know. How much did Kellyanne Conway have to do with it? How much did Stephen Miller have to do with it? How much of it was Kushner? How much of it was, Priebus? How much of it was whoever the hell happens to be there today and showed up for work and didn't get fired? And in the meantime, Trump's having an incredible mental breakdown in real time.
That's what I mean. Yeah. He is like that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And all you gotta do is say, he told me this, or get him to say it. It's just a bunch of prophets trying to interpret
Well, it's kind of the same thing
his
as Reagan, except for everybody involved is entirely morally bankrupt instead of just very misguided. Um, because at least under Reagan, there were a bunch of people that were like, we would like the country to not burn down, so we're gonna, do what we need to do to make that happen. As he, increasingly showed signs of Alzheimer's. And now you have a whole bunch of people who are like, oh, the president is increasingly showing signs of cognitive decline. So I think I'll use this as an opportunity to, get a leg up on a promotion or something, which is short sighted and stupid, but also, a very different ballgame than we have had with other presidents who've had the same kind of decline.
well, most recently Biden, he was also surrounded by whisperers, but since he never appeared in front of TV, it was difficult to tell what was his whisperers and what was him.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, Trump having a decline is not, new in the nation's history. What's new is that, like, they handed him a phone and a social media outlet and said, you own this. Go ahead and, you're contractually obligated actually to post on here twice a day during, your time in the presidency. So, I think that, the metrics have just changed a lot. And I do think that that is largely a cultural issue as much as it is anything else. But at the end of the day, we're all hosed. Like this whole thing is
I,
not
I, I
going well.
I think you misspoke. It's not a cultural issue, it's a cult issue. That's just me getting a one-liner in.
Okay, fair enough. It's a good one.
Um, well, we're not quite done, but I realized I didn't introduce you. You have been on the podcast before, or my YouTube channel anyway. Do you want to tell people who you are? Maybe give a shout out to anything you want to people to know, like how they can reach you and get you on their own podcast or give you writing stuff?
Sure. My name's Linda Tirado. You either know me because you care about poverty or because you read the news in 2020 or uh, possibly because you've found me go on a spree about which is the most attractive fish on Twitter. Um, or maybe you just read the thing that I did where JD Vance's book is actual bullshit. But the point is, I'm Killer Martinis on all of the socials, and lindatirado.com is the store. You can go buy merch there. And if you do that, then you give me money. And if you give me money, then I give money to poor people, which is kind of awesome. So, if you follow me on Blue Sky, you get an opportunity to throw money at me so I can give it away.
I will vouch for that. I have seen you take on a social project on Twitter and be like, hey, I have given these people this much money to keep them from being evicted. Can you guys give me some money so I don't get evicted? And I've, tried to contribute when I can.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I very frequently do things and then think about them. I'm very efficient that way.
Yeah, you're definitely a first. Act first and consider the consequences later. But I
This is,
suppose
this is why I just didn't think about ducking before I got shot.
you are the living opposition to the trolley problem.
Yeah, I'll just put myself on the tracks. Thanks, it's fine.
Well, the danger is that you overthink it and take no action, which is worse than taking some action. Whereas you would not overthink for a second. What action you would take, we can't say, but you would take an action and then you'd think about
So
it.
I see. I have thought about the trolley problem, and the answer is you blow up the tracks.
Well, that would require having the foresight to take some C4 or some other explosive, which would require foresight.
Dude, it's like you don't even know I'm from Utah. If you can't find C4 within a like 50-foot radius, you are not from the mountains.
Unless you're telling me you carry C4 on you at all times, which I recommend you don't say because ICE could be listening, I don't see that as a valid solution.
I haven't had access to plastic explosives in quite a while. All I'm saying is that, I did report from the Bundy thing, and there's a lot of C4 up there.
Not disagreeing, just that the point of it is the immediacy of taking action, which would mean immediate. I'm not even going to. I'm not going to go into this. But I do think it's outside the box. Outside the box.
I love that I got a lawyer to nearly talk about C4 on a public broadcast. But the point being, with the trolley problem is, even if all you have is a lever, you can disrupt the tracks far enough that the train would have to stop without derailing, and it wouldn't hit anybody. You just have to like know a little bit about levers and physics.
Give me a lever and a place to stand, and I can move the world.
Exactly. Sisyphus could
Oh,
never.
what's that?
Sisyphus could never.
Believe that's Archimedes, a quote.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah,
the
no, I
point.
was just talking about the rolling the mountain, the ball up the hill thing.
Yeah, no, I
What
know
about
Sisyphus. That's
Sisyphus Lake?
Sisyphean. Yeah, yeah. You know, which is basically trying to stop the slide in authoritarianism is a good Sisyphean task that we keep trying and keep failing at.
Well, I mean, the point is though that it's not whether or not you win; it's the fact that you went down swinging. And I think that a thing that people don't think about very frequently when they're considering the collapse of any given society or the breakdown of any given society or backsliding into authoritarianism or whatever is that like most societies actually end that way. And even the ones that have lasted for a really long time have gone through periods where that's happened. And we're a really young nation, and this was all an experiment. And so I think that, the idea that we're going to run through some hard times, especially given the rise of the internet and what that's meant for humanity generally, I think that it's not out of the realm of understanding that major powers would kind of have wobbles and backslides. So I don't necessarily think that, as far as over the course of human history, I don't think it's A, terribly unique, and B, terribly problematic, except for insofar as it's going to do a lot of harm in the short term. But I think in the long term, it works itself out.
Well, I mean, from your example, the vast majority of human history and the vast majority of societies have been authoritarian. I mean, you have Athens and then you have the US, and then you have a bunch of countries say, hey, democracy looks pretty neat. But even like today, 2025, about half the population is living under a dictatorship right now, depending on how you classify India as either the worst democracy or the most liberal dictatorship. It's pretty much on
Precisely.
the come. And that kind of tilts the balance. If you classify India as a dictatorship, about half the people are living in a dictatorship.
Speaking of
2025,
that, Pakistan's having a great one.
yeah, the numbers may have to shift. Um, but I mean, like that's like this is, clearly the most future point of of human development, and we've cracked half, and we consider that a win. Hey, half the population is gets to choose their leadership. So I mean, I agree with you. Backsliding is totally reasonable, but with it's kind of sad we never got further than this.
Yeah, but I think we do get further than this. It's just kind of a two steps forward, one step back kind of situation, which always feels really hopeless. But, the fact remains if I go on the internet and I say, hey, I need help with this or that thing, so that somebody that you've never met has a slightly better or at least less worse day, I'm pretty much guaranteed within, a day or so to have raised that money, which during a time of increasing economic uncertainty is somewhat of a miracle. So I think that, the fact remains that there's a lot of reason for hope out there, and the hope is in, kind of mutual aid and individual action, which is sad because it should be governmental, but at the same time, occasionally you have to let the kid touch a hot stove. And I think we're at a hot stove moment as a nation.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure peasants throughout the Middle Ages helped each other all the time, but it didn't stop it from being ruled by divine right and kings and,
Well, sure,
extreme
but we're
oppression.
not ruled by divine right or kings, so that's kind of a specious argument as far as it goes. Like, we are in a democracy, and that is what's happening. The world is bending in that direction, and it's slower than we'd like. But, again, with the internet, we saw the Arab Spring. We're seeing all of these kids with that pirate stuff. The anime guy from Japan is now a protest symbol. Even in my own work, what I've seen is people out there doing a lot of anti-authoritarian, anti-fascist kind of work without even thinking twice about it. And it's when you get out your phone and you film the cops, when you do everything you need to do, when you're engaging in actual civil disobedience and you're willing to go to jail for it, because that's kind of the point of civil disobedience, is that this is an unjust law and you're not going to follow it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make the world worse by doing that. So I think that you've got all of these examples, and I think that while I understand your pessimism, I think you're being kind of a pessimist about it.
Well, excuse me for being pessimistic as the norms and laws of democracy are shattered around me. Um,
Well, yeah, but that's exactly the danger. And if you read, any place where a population has lived through something like this, what they say is the first thing they need you to do is lose hope. Because if you lose hope, then you stop working. And if you stop working, then they get to take over more easily. So again, the point is to go down swinging. But if you talk to anybody from Ukraine or talk to, Rita Rent or anything like that, you're going to find that what people say is keeping up hope and keeping up morale is nearly as important as anything else that you do. Because if we can't count on each other and we don't believe in each other, then what's the point of fighting to begin with?
oh, that's where principle comes in. I fight best from a place of hopelessness. It's going to
No,
go
well,
wrong, but you just do it anyway because it's worth doing.
yeah, that's precisely it. I just find that to be an inherently hopeful position.
Yeah, I find it a hopeless position, but we're not really arguing.
Yeah, I don't think we are. I think we just phrase things differently.
Well, you have a belief in human nature, and I have a belief in human nature that this is exactly the government we deserve, but that a few of us are going to fight anyway.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have faith in human nature. I worked minimum wage far too much for that. But I think that, a thing that I learned from that mostly is that you just kind of got to keep going and laugh at it. Because if you can't laugh, you're going to cry. And if you cry, then you have the same problems you started with plus a wet eye patch. And wet eye patches are itchy and expensive. And so, laugh.
Sure, I'm just worried that this is not the worst part. This is the preface to, I think you've mentioned J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and 1,000 years of techno-feudalism.
Oh, yeah, no, this is not nearly as bad as it's going to get. Everything's going to it's going to be a shit show by middle of next year. I don't know if you've paid attention much to the executive orders, but Trump has put out more of them, just in the first since he's been in office this term, as most presidents do in their entire, 4 or 8 years in office. So, like, the wholesale dismantling of the government, of the safety net, of political norms, all of those things are incredibly worrisome, and we're entirely fucked. But also, you know, it doesn't mean you stop fighting. And I think that the fact that people will still fight inherently, no matter how many of them it is, there's always going to be some that do. I think that's an inherently it's a reason for hope, or at least that's the way you have to classify it in order to survive.
Well, let's go with hope. Let's just for a moment. Blue sky here, because we're getting ready to finish. What blue sky? What do you see is if you were to say this is how I would write the movie? What's the scene? What's the pathway to victory? How do we stop? If just you could just write it. I personally think that the best thing we could do is if California and maybe Oregon and Washington secede and just make a West Coast country where like liberties and rights are respected and dare Trump to try and invade. Like make our own little Ukraine. I
I
think
mean,
that.
I
But
don't know that
you
I would write that ending, but I do know that that was essentially what de Tocqueville said in Democracy in America. Is he came over and he said, "Look, this place is great, and it's a pretty dream, but like that's a lot of societies, a lot of cultures, a lot of land, and I don't think you can hold that together for very long." So I think that we held it together for quite a long time, and I do think that civil war is not exactly the thing that's going to happen, but I do see a fundamental breakdown into maybe a confederation of various groupings of states by region or interest. But I don't really know that I would write a movie about it because I don't think that there is any one particular solution. I think it's going to depend on when we hit the tipping point, what's going on in the world, and what technology is available then. Because I mean, even just AI, which we don't have time to get into, but the speed with which that's moving is going to be telling of like, well, where are we on that path? And so I think, I wouldn't necessarily write an ending, but what I do know is that humanity inherently always finds a way. And it seems pretty dire right now, and it is, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to always go the worst. So,
No, but I'm not saying if you were queen of the resistance, if everybody
right.
who vaguely anti-Trump answered to you, what would
Oh,
your solution be? If you had all the resources, not all the resources of the world, but if you had all the anti-Trump resources and you were going to direct them, what do you think would be the best solution?
mutual aid. That's it. Just build the society you want to have. If you've got all that resources and all that money, build the society you want to have, build the structures that you want to have, and then, dare the government to do less. Because I think that once you have torn through enough communities and been like, oh, is FEMA not showing up? Is the government not showing up? We're here to help because that's kind of what we do. That's the whole deal. I think that that is the solution I would have is everybody it's everybody to it's all hands on deck and everybody to your strengths.
Basically, create a government within a government and make the federal government redundant?
No, create a society that doesn't require the federal government to do it for us, which is not necessarily an isolationist position or a small government position. Just they're doing it wrong. So, we have the technology. We can just do things on our own without the government being involved. And I prove that pretty much every day I get online and go, hey, we need to solve this problem. Here's how we're going to do it. And it's not always money. Sometimes we're moving people, we're getting people out of a out of a bad situation with rides and offers of shelter and things like that. So I think that when it comes down to it, that's kind of my overall.
Okay, well, maybe it's the guy. I mean, maybe it's because in the military, I feel like a solution would need logistics, economic power, and tanks and troops to stop an authoritarian regime. I think it can be done. I think Ukraine stopped Russia. I think that we could organize enough to stop the overreaching federal government. That's what I would do if I was king of the resistance, but it's certainly not an ideal outcome. Anyway, I guess that's hope. That's what we have in stock for hope. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I hope we can have you on again.
Absolutely.
All right. You told everybody where they can reach you. They know who you are. Any last thing you want to put out into the world?
Yeah, walk out your front door, turn in a direction, and go until you find something you can do to help somebody, and then do that every single day, just once.
You said that last time. Anything new?
I think that's new every day.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.